Okay, good. So we are back on technical issues solved. Let me continue on code contributions. So Jamal said a lot of words about a lot of things about the how to contribute a non-code, and I was also doing that as an engineer, and for all the engineers out there, it would be great to know how to contribute as like with the code. So obviously, one of the things is like you can contribute features or bug fixes, and this is like pretty obvious. Uh, but there are also some not obvious ways of contributions. So you can raise issues. So just describing it well so that contributors can actually, committers can actually reproduce it. So including reproduction steps. That is great way of contributing, because this way committers and people who will be generally fixing those problems will know how to reproduce them. Some clarifications on issues. So many people are raising issues, and it's not like entirely clear how to reproduce it, or several people contribute similar features, and only after several of them contribute or gives an information about it, we can find out what really the problem is. So this is a super useful contribution. One of the super important, and not everyone realizes that, super important contributions are documentation changes and improvements. And this goes for two ways. So generally speaking, any open source project is as good as the documentation for it is. This is something that we've learned over time, that your documentation has to be really, really good if you want your project to be used, and so that people know how to use it. And this is super valuable for us, and we are accepting a lot of contributions which are just code contributions, and they are super valuable for everyone, for all the community. And especially there are parts of the documentation which are user oriented, or like for users, and actually it's best if it's the users who contribute to this documentation, because they know best what they need in this kind of documentation. They know how to phrase it so that it will be easy to understand, because we as committers, we are often not even users. Sometimes we run Airflow, or sometimes we just contribute and commit code, review others' code, but we are not heavy users. So for us, a lot of things are obvious, and for users are not. So when we describe it, we have a lot of assumptions which we make, and it's not always best for users who don't have those assumptions. So we actually encourage a lot of users to contribute the documentation for themselves, and this is the best way how to get the documentation. And also, there is a big part about tooling. We want to be as efficient as possible in developing our code. So there is a tooling part which is not directly features or bugs in the Airflow itself, but all the tooling. That's the CI master that Tomek mentioned before when we started. So I contributed a lot of code in the CI, continuous integration of running Airflow, to make everyone more efficient. So how the workflow works for contributions. So first you have to fork Airflow master. We only contribute stuff to master branch. We will rename it quite soon, most likely, because of the general changes of naming in Git and GitHub. So you make your own fork. Then you configure the environment, and there are several things that you can do. Like you can create a local virtual env, or we have a special development environment called Breeze. I will tell a little bit about that in a moment. Install pre-commit. This is a kind of verification we do initially on every commit you do. Then you go and connect with the people. So you don't just contribute the code without speaking to anyone. That doesn't work usually, because you need to get a little bit of feedback on what you want to gonna contribute, or even realize what is being worked on in the community. So it's best to join the dev list, set up Slack account, and see what's going on before you actually contribute. This makes things easier for you to understand what is really important. Then you prepare a PR with your changes from your fork. Then follow the guidelines. There are very good guidelines written in contributing RST documentation. Then there is a PR review process. And a little bit about this PR review process. First of all, at the top, you just make a PR, and then you get comments, and there are reviews for the comments. Then it's a bit like a continuous circle. So then you apply the fixes or extend tests if you're asked for, or like make some changes to it. Then you commit it, you make a fix up commit, submit. Then you ping people that commented initially on your pull request, and then go back to the circle. And this circle can repeat several times. Don't expect that all the comments you will get will be there initially. It's often and quite normal that the PR goes in circle and gets several rounds of review. No worries about that. Uh, a few guidelines very quickly. So there is no need to make an issue to make a PR. So in GitHub there are issues and PRs, and in our case the PR is what matters. Sometimes there are issues describing the problem that you're fixing, but it's not necessary. If you just can describe it in the PR itself, it's perfectly enough. We need a good description. So description in the commit and in the PR itself, which are often the same, has to be like rather descriptive, telling not only what you are doing, but why you are doing it, so the context of the change. When you do the PR review, be patient and persistent in terms of, like, first of all, it's not always very quickly that you get comments. Sometimes you get comments which are very detailed, and they are asking you to fix this and this and this, and like just be considerate and patient. We care about the quality of all the PRs. Any change will have to be maintained in the future, so by others most likely. So we want to make sure that whatever gets in our code is really good quality. So be just understand that, accept the critic, and the critic is not for you, not directed to you, but to the code. And sometimes simply there is a different understanding what the good code is in the community and like what you might understand. So just when you go and contribute code to the community, like how we understand it, how the community understands it, it's generally more important. So don't take it personally, be empathetic, be open to applying some changes that we ask you, because that makes the things better for the community to maintain in the future. Sometimes such a PR review cycle can take weeks. Yes, it happens, or even months, if there are bigger PRs and ask for more important areas. So don't be afraid, or don't. If you see that it takes like days or weeks for your PR to be reviewed, it's just normal. The pace in the community is like that, because we have many PRs to look at, and while one PR just goes slowly, many PRs are going in parallel. So generally the speed is quite good, I think. And you might experience some difference of opinions. And if you see that like two committers tell you completely different things, then ask them to align between themselves if you are not able to resolve it. And this is also happening. And like the thing is, like, we are all humans. We didn't agree all the rules and all the things between ourselves, so we have different opinions sometimes. And don't be put off by that. Just like, try to resolve it. This slide very, very quickly. So we have a very, very comprehensive documentation for anyone who wants to start coding. So we have a contributor quick start documentation. So you can just go through it very quickly, step by step, and you have all the environments set. We have the documentation about different development environments to be set. For different purposes, you might need like a local development environment, or we have a special one, which is my kind of baby, like Breeze, which is a Docker-based development environment for more complex tests that you can run. And there is a video describing this, so you can learn how to use it and what you can do with it. There is a contributing documentation, which might be overwhelming. That's why the contributors quick start at the very beginning is something to start very, very rather quickly. But then if you have some important issues to solve, or you don't know what to do, then you can find all the information in this contributing documentation. And finally, something that is good to check. There is this page, contribute page. Every project in GitHub has this page, and there you can find a list of first good issues. So issues that probably are good for a newcomer to start working on. There are a number of sources of information that you can follow, like the ecosystem page, which describes useful tools and useful information about Airflow that you can find. There is the awesome Apache Airflow page. There is especially when you get where you are a user of Airflow, there is this fantastic set of videos, Airflow Summit 2020 from the last year. We've done like more than 40 talks from different practitioners of Airflow. And you can learn from others' mistakes by watching at them, because they are a lot of them are talking about like mistakes we've done or how we've done that. And what kind of things we had to change in our implementation. So just go and look there. If you look for particular information, you can see the list of those. And this year there will be another Airflow Summit, as was mentioned at the beginning, in May. So we are working on it as well. And there is an issue where you can. This is a specific issue. This currently we are working on, and then you have a summary of all the kind of bigger initiatives that we are working on. So that's kind of useful things to find out if you really want to find out what's going on right now. How to get help. So as Jamal mentioned before, communication is important, and often when you're stuck, you just go ask for help. And few rules about that, how you can ask for help. So don't expect there will be like one single person that you can always go to, but there is a whole community, which is even better. So because different people have different experience, and most active committers are not really regular users because they spend a lot of time to commit stuff. So we also rely not only about the committers and active contributors to help others, but there's a big group of users of Airflow in our community, especially in Slack, and we have discussions that can help you. So don't ask one or other person, just ask in the open, in the community channels. A few words about that. And the main reason is people are helping each other. If you're asking a specific person, it's just like this person is this single point of failure. If you're asking in the open, it's much better for you, bigger chance to get answers. And especially when you have some troubleshooting, like using Airflow, like you started using it and something breaks and you don't know how it works. It's not like a bug, it's not like a feature, but people tend to sometimes open a bug or issue for that, which is not a good idea. The best idea is just go through like Slack or GitHub discussions and then discuss with people. And often those will be other users who will help you. Yeah. So you don't waste a lot of time of contributors or committers to answer those questions. Just ask other users, and they are super helpful. This is the great part of community, that it happens. So we have Slack. And you can join the Slack by going through this link, Slack, Apache Airflow Slack, herokuapp.com. This presentation hopefully will be available, so you'll be able to see all the links there. You can ask any kind of questions, but the important thing is like you have to show that you've done your part. So like when you describe your issues, you just describe it immediately to the level enough that we can actually make some actions, and don't have to ask many additional questions. Just be descriptive of what your problem is, like what you tried already to do before, because that makes it much easier for us to answer. And then you see that it's not a kind of question that you didn't even try to find an answer, because there are other sources of information, like there is Slack Overflow, Googling stuff is helping, looking through all other issues or looking through the GitHub discussions can give you the answers. So you just have to show that if you had a problem, you've already did this kind of querying, and you've done your part. That makes it much better, easier to get the answer, because people will know that you've spent your time there, and they will be more willing to help you with spending their time on it. Like Airflow is a community-driven project, so this is like really community is helping. Yeah. People are helpful. Sometimes you need to ask several times. This is important because like on Slack or GitHub discussions, things can get lost. So it's better if you don't get answered, don't be put off by that. Just ask again after some time, not immediately in 3 different channels. That doesn't work. But if you don't get answer for some time, you just can repeat the question, and then people will realize it was really important. You still don't have answer, and get bigger chance. You have bigger chance to get answer. And people are helpful. They are truly, and I'm amazed how many questions you get from random people there, how many answers. If you give help, you are also most likely to get help. So if you do have some answers for somebody, don't hesitate to answer. If you've done that, oh, sorry for that. If you got some troubles and resolve them, you can actually help others. And there are some and you don't have to know who to ask. Just ask in the open in several of those channels you have, like troubleshooting, newbie questions, and development is the main important channel for development. The newbie questions is like you can ask any question you want. I mean, you're a newbie. No problems there. Like, you can really ask any question. Troubleshooting is where you have some kind of problems to solve, and development is mostly if you have a development related question. Those are the important ones, but there are many others in our Slack channels that you can go through for specific questions you might have. So how to get bigger chance of getting help in the community? Just be present. So like, read what happens on the dev list. It's not like it's a bit like there are some messages, but they are not like many messages. Be active in the discussions which are happening there. If you know that like can provide some input to the discussions, just don't hesitate. Just tell what you know about that, or if you had some experience with something like that or issue, just comment. Help others and be personal. And if you do that, if you do that, then simply it's people will see that you're there, and will most likely and that you are helpful, and most likely you will get much more help, because they will see that you've done your part, and the help is like a karma which comes back to you, really. Then when you raise issues, it's important to again, showing that you've done your part, what I told before. Give maximum information you can so that it can be reproducible. You ask nicely for help. It's like you don't demand help. This is the, like, most people in community are voluntaries. So it's not like you are entitled to get help. No, they are helping because they volunteer their time. So if you ask nicely rather than demand. This is like very bad impression if you see somebody who is demanding answer. It's not a good idea, generally speaking, for a community. And if you see that there are some relevant people to your area, the problem that you're describing or question you have, you don't hesitate. You can also ping them, but do it in the open. So don't message those people directly. Just ping them in the message in the Slack or in the GitHub. That may raise their attention. But on the other hand, if you write message directly to those people, nobody else will know. Nobody else will be able to help you because you just focused on this one person. So it's not a good idea. Just ping them yeah, this is much better also for the future, because somebody will see the history of that. That's about it. Thank you. I think we can go to questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you a lot, Ajamal and Jarek. I think we did quite well with those all technical problems. So yeah, now it's the time for the questions, and please write them on the YouTube channel or on the Slack. One of the questions is, do you had any experience of feeling that you did something bad in the community? Like, you did something that you thought that it was going to be a great thing, did great improvements on anything, and then someone came and said, this is not how we do this, and you feel somehow offended.
I can answer that, or because I did actually. so that's a fantastic question. Like, yes, I did. Like, one of the first discussions which I've done in the community was like when I discussed stuff outside of the dev list about kind of important change. It was about the dependency management. And I discussed it with a few people, which I thought are important in the community. That was my first impression. And I got, like, we agreed to something. I thought like that. And I wrote a message in the discussion list. This is the change is coming into the Airflow, and it's going to be like that. And I was really politely reminded that it's not the case. Like, it's not been discussed in the discussion in the dev list, so it hasn't happened. And I was like, initially I was like, oh man, I thought really wrong. Yeah, that's like that's the end of my journey in the community. But then it's like I apologized. I said, hey, yeah, I didn't realize that, and that was really polite way of saying that, even though it was very firm. And for me, it was like, yeah, that this community is really nice because they tell you if you did something wrong, and I apologized. Like half a year later, I was a committer, and half a year later, I was a PMC member. So this didn't stop. Like this first message was not like the end; it was just the beginning. And this is important. Like you can make mistakes, no problems. People will just tell you. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. Just be open to take the critique and say like, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. No problem. Like, sorry, I will make it better. Yeah.
I can think of my own something like I'm sure I've done something horrible, but but what I wanted to say, and this is more important, that the communities, the open source communities, especially Airflow open source community, is very forgiving, and the Apache Software Foundation is very forgiving too. And we have done things as a project, like for example, not getting approval on the let's say logo for Airflow Summit, right? Then we said, and they kindly reminded the trademark of the ASF reminded, hey, you should follow this process to get things done. And then we said, oh, apologies, we didn't know. Here's how we're following the process, and they're always forgiving. They always forgive mistakes, and again, mistakes are mistakes, and we value humans, and we rely on contributions. So don't take personally if you get any like some kind of critique. Be ready for that, but also we try to do the kind of criticism in private, but also we do praise in public. So that's a kind that's the thing we try to follow. And again, never take things personally in open source. Like sometimes you can see how people arguing with each other on the mailing list, but they're like actually really, really great friends in real life. And the software development needs discussion. So
Thank you so much for the examples. I think that we possibly have time for one more question. If anyone have something. So yeah, one question from me, because you told about the non-code contributions, and I think it's quite easy to talk about them once you're the part of the community and you understand they are needed and they are required. And my question is, how do people who are non-code, like are not code related, should learn about that? Do you have any tips for people who are not software engineers or working in the DevRel to join open source, especially Airflow?
So the way I started, it was I just followed the dev list and I saw like things happening and I lurked what kind of discussions were happening. And back then the community wasn't as active as it is today. And I just looked around and I saw, oh, like they have so many untriaged issues. I think like someone could help here. And I was like, oh my God. Sorry, I think I have lags in the thing again. So what's happening? I'm apologies. There's many things happening. Sorry, is it good now? I don't know. Today is a crazy day with the platform, but anyway, I was just lurking in the dev list and seeing what things needs to get done, and I would like offer my help. And I saw like, and as it went, like as time went by, I became more and more comfortable to propose new changes. And I started like saying, hey, how about we get the new website? And like I went to my employer and was like, hey, can we help this open source project that is doing great stuff? And there's like, okay, like let's do this. And like it was very like rewarding journey. And I would suggest just join the community, see what they're discussing, and see and there will be a like part of the there will be part that you can help and you can join and just share that intention and connect with people who are driving those projects and offer your help. And we always value that. Sorry.
Tomek, you're muted.
Okay, so now I'm muted. So thank you all. I think the what Ijamal said is great tip for those who would like to start contributing to any project, open source project. And remember that we wait for you in the Apache Airflow. So now is the time for the second talk, I think. The second talk will be by Mark Lamberti, who I'm sure you know from the YouTube channel. So if you're looking for the any tutorial for the Apache Airflow, then for sure you found Mark's videos. And today Mark will tell us more about the Airflow 2.0 and especially how to get started with that. So clap your hands, and Mark, stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Now it's better. 15 years ago, we had a revolution, and this is a phone. But back in the days, like poorly designed and very slow and hard to use. And then we got smartphones. This is the revolution we had. Now we are able to run applications, we're able to access to the internet, we can do pretty much whatever we want with smartphones. And I'm pretty sure that you wouldn't want to go back with old phones. Okay, now you are wondering, what is the link with Airflow? Actually, 2 months ago, we had a revolution. And yes, this revolution won't change your life, but it will change your way of managing and creating data pipelines in Airflow. And this is Airflow 2.0. My name is Mark Lamberti. I'm the head of customer training at Astronomer. And during the next 25 minutes, you are going to discover what are the new features of Airflow 2.0, why is this a massive improvement from Airflow 1.10.x, and why is this important for you. I think the best way to get started is to start with the feature that you will see as soon as you start Airflow, the user interface. And this is the user interface of Airflow 1.x. I'm pretty sure that you know this user interface, as we use it daily, but the problem is this user interface is not secure at all. Indeed, you have the data profiling tab, and if you access to the data profiling tab, well, you can access the data from your metadatabase, and that's definitely not something that you want. Indeed, if you use Airflow in production, you want to make sure that your user interface is secure. And more importantly, you are not able to create roles, permissions for your users. Actually, in Airflow 1, we had 2 user interfaces, and this one was the UI by default. In Airflow 2.0, it's over. Now there is only one user interface, and this user interface is this one. As you can see, it is definitely clearer and better designed than the previous one. More importantly, you can finally create roles and permissions along your users. So if you use Airflow in production, you have to go with the ORBAC UI in order to create the permissions and the roles you need for your users. Another important feature was the auto refresh. I'm pretty sure that you have triggered a DAG and you were on the graph view waiting for your tasks to be done by manually refreshing the page. And this is really boring. Instead, one of the, I think the most expected feature is the auto refresh button. Now, from the graph view, you can just trigger your DAG and see your tasks getting triggered one after the other thanks to the auto refresh button. So really, this is a small change, but game changing. So now we have seen the user interface along with the auto refresh button that we were really expecting. But there is another feature that I think you are expecting, like at least since 2 years ago, and there is a good chance that you are expecting it as well, which is the API. This is the previous API. This is the API that you get from Airflow 1.10.x. Let's say that you want to interact with variables. You can't. Let's say that you want to retry diagrams. You can do it. Let's imagine now that you want to build an application on top of Airflow to manage your users. You can do it as well. As you can see, the API in Airflow 1.10.x was really experimental. And this since like 2 years ago, I think. Now it's over. In Airflow 2.0, there is a new API, the stable REST API. And I can show you right now that this, from the documentation, is really different. It is a huge improvement over the experimental API. As you can see right now, the documentation is much more clear. You can clearly see all the endpoints you have, and actually you can pretty interact with whatever you can pretty much interact with all the components of Airflow, such as connections, variables, or diagrams, and more importantly, most of the endpoints have CRUD operations. So if you want to create a connection, if you want to read the connection, if you want to list the connections, if you want to delete a connection, for example, you can do it. And also, you are able to know exactly what the endpoint expects and what it produces. That's what you can see from the right. So really, like right now, if you want to interact with the API, please go to the documentation of Airflow after the talk, go to the documentation of Airflow and check the stable REST API. This is like a huge improvement over the previous API, really. Okay, so we've discovered the new UI as well as the stable API. What is the third component with which we interact the most in Airflow? And actually, as soon as you install Airflow for the first time, you will interact with that component. Well, this is the command line interface. And in Airflow 2.0, there is a new command line interface. The command line interface has been entirely redesigned. You know, the problem with the previous command line interface is that there were many commands, and it is still the case, but now they are better organized. And this is super important as you will use the command line interface pretty often. You know, for example, if you want to test your tasks, well, you will use the command line interface. So what are the kind of commands that you get from the new CLI? Well, first, if you want to interact with all your commands have been put into groups. And groups are the resources that you want to interact with. For example, you want to interact with the database. You will use AirflowDB in it. You want to interact with your tasks, you will use Airflow tasks and then the command you want to execute. And I strongly advise you, as a best practice, to always test your tasks with Airflow task test. And then if you want to interact with your users, you know how to do that. You use Airflow users and create or list and so on. So all of your commands have been grouped together in different groups. And the groups are the resources you want to interact with. There are some exceptions with the commands such as Airflow web server or Airflow scheduler in order to start either the scheduler or the web server. Okay, so we've discovered the new user interface. We know that we have the stable REST API in order to execute requests and build applications on top of Airflow. And now we've discovered the new command line interface. Now I would like to move to now it's time to discover the massive improvement that will make you fall in love with Airflow 2.0. Really. This is the most important, incredible improvement of Airflow 2.0, and this is the scheduler. Before, if you use Airflow 1.10.x right now, I'm pretty sure that whenever you trigger a DAG, even a simple DAG, well, executing the tasks is pretty slow, and the problem is, as you will create tasks, is, as you will create tests, if it's not already the case, well, your tests will be executed in your CI/CD pipeline. And if you have integration tests in order to make sure that your DAGs are working as expected, well, those tests will take a lot of time. Well, guess what? In Airflow 2.0, in average, the scheduler is 10 times faster. So that means if you use the new scheduler, if you go with Airflow 2.0 and run a DAG, there is a good chance that you won't even be able to see the tasks being triggered as it is so fast right now. And this is super important because, for example, you have tight SLAs. Well, obviously this is required. Or you want to start thinking about micro batchings, with small schedule intervals. You might be able to do that with the new scheduler. And last but not least, obviously your tests will be much faster to execute. And so you will be able to push new DAGs faster as well. So this is a great improvement, definitely. But there is even better. Indeed, what about if the scheduler goes down? Well, this is the single point of failure in Airflow 1.10.x. If your scheduler goes down, you won't be able to trigger any more tasks. And this is critical. As you can imagine, and that might be your case right now, Airflow is a central piece of your data stack. So if the scheduler goes down and you are not able to execute any more tasks, well, obviously the data scientists or the data analysts or even the managers won't be able to get their data in time, which can cause you a lot of trouble. Again, this is over. With Airflow 2.0, the scheduler is highly available. What does it mean? It means that you can run as many schedulers as you want. For example, let's imagine that this scheduler goes down. Actually, that's okay, because you have two other schedulers running. And so you can continue, you can still trigger your tasks with the other scheduler. So that's why it is super important. If you use Airflow in production, you have to use Airflow 2.0. This is the most important feature, and this is required in order to have a resilient, reliable orchestrator. Right now, you are able to execute. Right now, you are able to have as many schedulers as you want. If one goes down, you still have the other schedulers in charge of scheduling your tasks. There are three benefits for that. First, zero downtime. So that means, again, if one scheduler goes down, you still have the others. Also, if you want to apply some updates to your schedulers, you can do that one at a time. So basically, you will shut down the first scheduler, then update it, and then you will run it again, then go to the second scheduler, shut it down, put your patch, and then run it again, and so on. So this is the rolling updates, and you can do this right now because the scheduler is highly available. And last but not least, now you are able to scale to the infinity. Basically, if you have thousands of tasks to execute, you can do that with Airflow. The only thing you need is to add a new machine with a new scheduler, or even a new machine with multiple schedulers, and you add more resources to your Airflow instance, which means you can execute as many tasks as you want. So again, this is super, super important. If you use Airflow in production, you have to make sure that you have at least multiple schedulers running at the same time. Right now, if you use Airflow 1.10.x, you have a single point of failure. Okay, so all the improvements we've discovered so far are related to Airflow itself, the structure of Airflow. But what about DAGs? What are the new features that make our DAGs better? I think there is one feature that probably everybody has ever used in Airflow, which is the sub-DAGs. Sub-DAGs are not recommended at all. You should avoid as much as possible sub-DAGs. Why? First, you can end up with deadlocks, which means at some point you might not be able to execute any more tasks in your Airflow instance, which is pretty bad, as you can imagine. Second, sub-DAGs are pretty complex. You have to create a new file with Python function, and this Python function returns a DAG. So you have to instantiate a DAG. You have to take care of the schedule interval. Also, you have to import the subDAG operator, then call the Python function. You have to make sure that the DAG ID of the subDAG is the one expected. You know, there is a special notation. I mean, so much complexity just to group tasks together. It is overcomplicated. And also, they have their own executor. So basically, if you use Airflow right now with the local executor and you have some subDAGs, actually those subDAGs are using the sequential executor. I think it is the executor set by default to avoid some inconsistent behaviors. Okay, so there are many ways of why you should, there are many reasons of why you should not use subDAGs. And if you are using subDAGs inside subDAGs, it is even worse. Okay, so please avoid doing this. Okay, now you might say, thank you, Mark. We should not use subDAGs, but what should we use instead? You should use task groups. Task groups is a new concept in Airflow 2.0, and they do exactly what the subDAGs do, but in a better and more efficient way. Let me show you this. This is the only thing you need in order to group your tasks together. That's it. No need to import a subDAG operator, no need to create a new Python function, no need to instantiate a DAG and take care of the schedule interval and the default arguments and everything. No, you don't need that. The only thing you need is to import the task group, then instantiate a task group with an ID and put your tasks under that task group. That's it. It is more efficient, faster to implement, there is no risk of deadlocks, and you can even create groups of groups without, having weird behaviors and so on. So this is definitely easier to implement, and you should use task groups. You have to use task groups instead of subDAGs. In my opinion, right now, but I might be wrong, there is no real reasons to continue to use subDAGs instead of task groups. Task groups group your tasks, and that's what you want. subDAGs are way more complex only for grouping tasks together. So go with task groups. Okay, so subDAGs were time consuming and complex to understand. But there is another thing that we do over and over again, creating DAGs. Airflow 2.0 introduces a new way of creating DAGs and Python tasks, which is the TaskFlow API. Again, I strongly believe that an image was 1,000 words. So let me show you this. This is a DAG with the TaskFlow API. So what do you need to instantiate a DAG, to create a DAG with the TaskFlow API? Well, first, you need two decorators, DAG and task. In order to instantiate a DAG with the TaskFlow API, you just need to use the DAG. The DAG decorator, as you can see right there. Then you specify some parameters, the start date, the schedule interval, the catch-up parameter, as usual, the same parameters, but in the DAG decorator. And then you define a Python function corresponding to your DAG. So process_DAG here is the DAG ID, and it is your DAG that you will have if you instantiate a DAG object. Next, and this is really important, and this is really amazing, if you want to create a task, for example, if you want to create a Python operator, what you will do? Usually you import the Python operator, and then you implement the Python operator in the DAG object, and then you create a Python function outside of the DAG object, and in a better way, in another file, in another Python file. Well, it is pretty long to do that, and the Python operator is the most widely used operator. So definitely, if there is a easiest and fastest way to implement the Python operator, that could be much better. Well, this is exactly what does the task decorator. With the task decorator, you only need to create a Python function just below the decorator, and this Python function becomes automatically a Python operator with the function that you want to execute. So in that case here, def extract will become a Python operator executing extract. So it is much faster for creating Python operator tasks. And last but not least, what you can see below is the dependencies set with the TaskFlow API. When you share data between your tasks, you will use XComs to do that. But the problem with XComs is that they create implicit dependencies between your tasks. Indeed, you have to take a look into your code and even into your Python functions to know if that Python function exports or creates XCOM, and then you have to take a look at the other Python function to know if that XCOM is used in it. It creates implicit dependencies that can be pretty hard to manage if you have hundreds of tasks. Well, with the TaskFlow API, you can define, and actually if you use the task decorator, you can define your dependencies exactly like what you can see below, what you can see from below. So for example, let's say extract data produces some data that you want to process. Well, you create an XCOM and you put your data into that XCOM. Then the task process will automatically take the data produced from extract and will process the data. And you can clearly see the dependency from the functions below, with extract data calling first and then process data having the function extract data, having the function extract in the parameter as parameter of the function process. Okay. And as a best practice, don't forget, don't use XComs to share big data. Okay? XComs are limited in size, so be careful with XComs. So that's it about the TaskFlow API. So the TaskFlow API is really useful if you want to create, your dags in a little bit faster way, and also if you have many Python operators, you should definitely use the decorator, the task decorator. It will make your life easier, and your DAG will become clearer. This is super important. You will end up with many tasks. So you have to make sure that your DAGs are as clear as possible. Okay, so the TaskFlow API is super interesting. I mean, we can definitely change the way of creating DAGs, but there is one other feature that you use a lot. The Python operator is one of the most widely used operator, but there is another kind of operator that you use a lot, the sensors. And the problem with the sensors is that they are kind of dumb, I would say. Let me explain. In Airflow 2.0, there is a new kind of sensors, the smart sensors. What I mean by the fact that the previous sensors were dumb? Well, they are not really dumb, but the thing is, a sensor waits for something to happen before moving to the next task. And the problem is, if you have hundreds of sensors waiting for something, they take worker slots. And the problem is you can end up with deadlocks as well. If you don't have any more worker slots, you won't be able to execute any more tasks, which is a big issue. And as the sensors are waiting for something, if the something doesn't show up, well, they will wait indefinitely, unless you've put a timeout. Also, it can happen that you have multiple sensors from multiple different DAGs waiting for the same thing. And since they are waiting for the same thing, well, you have kind of duplicates. You have some duplicates, and you don't want to have duplicates because you are wasting resources. Okay. And last but not least, sensors produce heartbeats. So if you have many sensors, again, you will create a lot of requests against your database, and you should take care of your database. So this is why the smart sensors have been introduced. How they work? Well, you will have, instead of having one sensor executed at a time, your sensors will be executed in batches, where the sensors having the same kind of context, for example, sharing the same schedule, sharing the same interval, or waiting for the same thing, they will be put inside the same smart sensor operator. They will be put into the same group. And then, at a given interval of time, your sensors will be checked in batches. Okay, and so this is definitely more optimized because you are avoiding resources, you avoid wasting resources that you are paying for, because right now the sensors won't take worker slots indefinitely until they are done. You will just have a bunch of workers. You will just have some smart sensors being executed at a given interval of time, and they avoid duplicates. If you have some sensors that are duplicates, so waiting for the same thing, for example, you won't have a duplicate. You will end up with only one sensor managing all the sensors that are duplicates. And last but not least, it reduces the number of heartbeats. Obviously, as you will end up with less sensors, you will make less requests to the metastore. And this is, again, super important. You have to take care of your database. So smart sensors are extremely powerful, extremely powerful. And you should use them if you have like hundreds of sensors. Because I know what you can say right now. You can say, actually, with the sensor, I can use the reschedule mode. And this works. But if you have, again, you have to think about like what will happen if you have hundreds of sensors, which can be your case at some point. Well, even with the POC method reschedule, you will end up with some troubles. Okay, you might end up with deadlocks as well. So that's why smart sensors are really useful if you have hundreds of sensors that are running in your Airflow instance right now. Now I would like to talk, now we know about sensors, the task-free API, and the task groups. There is one last thing super important. And there is a good chance that you use right now the Kubernetes executor. And I would like to talk about Kubernetes. In Airflow 2.0, the Kubernetes executor has been entirely redesigned. And more importantly, there is a new executor config allowing you to overwrite, overwrite your pods. And instead of, basically right now with Airflow 1.10.x, if you want to, if you use the executor config, actually you will be limited. You have this dictionary, and you can only customize what the dictionary allows you to customize. This is not the case anymore in Airflow 2.0. With the new executor config, you can fully use the Kubernetes API, and so as long as you know Kubernetes, which is a beast, you are able to customize your pods as much as you want. So if you use Kubernetes, this is super important. Okay, because you might want to specifically modify things for a specific task. You might want to specifically override a pod for a specific task. And you can do that with the executor config without any limitations. That's the difference with Airflow 1 and Airflow 2. Airflow 2.0 is a massive improvement. Airflow 2.0 is a massive improvement from Airflow 1.10.x. If your goal is to have a reliable, efficient, and fast orchestrator, you have to use Airflow 2.0. If you want to optimize your resources and execute as many tasks as you want, you have to use Airflow 2.0. If you want to create dags that are better designed and with new functionalities such as task groups, the task-free API, and the smart sensors, you have to use Airflow 2.0. You have to use Airflow 2.0. 2 months ago, I updated from Airflow 1.10.x to Airflow 2.0. And like with smartphones, I will never go back. So upgrade to Airflow 2.0. Thank you, everyone.
With the task flow group, because I was part of implementing it. So Now it's time for any questions that you may have to Mark and Apache Airflow 2.0. So feel free to post them on the YouTube stream or in the Meetups channel on the Airflow Slack. So one question from me, I think the one obvious is, what do you think is the biggest feature of the Airflow 2.0? Of course, apart from the auto refresh of the web server.
Actually, in my opinion, the most important reason to move to Airflow 2.0 is the scheduler. I mean, really, the scheduler is game changing right now. Like, if you want to use Airflow in production, you definitely have to move to Airflow 2.0 because you can't have like such important piece of your data stack like Airflow in charge of orchestrating your tasks and having a single point of failure. So that's why it is super important to move to Airflow 2.0 in order to get the scheduler in order to get the highly available scheduler. This is, in my opinion, this is the most critical point of why you should use Airflow 2.0. And actually, also the task groups, and it's not because it's you, Tomek, but I really believe that subdags is like a nightmare to deal with. Like really, I mean, I've seen subdags into subdags into subdags, and at some point it is really, really hard to maintain, to even understand. So that's why the task groups, it's also an amazing feature that you should definitely go with.
There is a question from Jarek regarding the task group. Is there a limitation for nesting task group within the DAG or the task group itself?
I never tried to I didn't do any benchmark for the task groups. Obviously, I think the real limitation, if you're, I will say, is what you want to achieve. Like, does it make sense to have like a task group into a task group into a task group into a task group? Like, at some point, usually you will say that maybe it's way more too complex for what I'm trying to achieve here. Okay, and so really the task groups are achieving what they should do, what subdags should do. They are grouping tasks. So usually, if you have some tasks showing the same logic, and you can group them together in order to make your DAG clearer. So that's where you could use that's where you can use task groups. But yeah, I didn't do any benchmark for that, but I strongly advise you to avoid, even with task groups, like try to keep your DAGs as clear as possible. Don't try to put task groups into task groups into task groups. Okay, that's my recommendation.
I definitely agree that this is amazing feature, but let's keep sanity and separate the DAGs if necessary. So I think that we don't have. Okay, yes, there is a question from Caxel. Will there be a certification? Like, will the certification that was announced or cover 2.0 concept too, like task groups? So I suppose this is about the certification from Astronomer.
What was the question? If the task groups will be inside in the certification?
Exactly. I think the wider context is if the certification will cover Airflow 2.0.
Oh yeah. The certification will cover Airflow 2.0 for sure. But there is a secret defense on the certification, so I can't talk about it so much. I won't talk about the questions, but definitely the exam covers covers the Airflow 2.0. I mean, we really want to. I mean, it's important. We don't want to end up with Python 2.7 and Python 3.6. Like it was the case with Python. We don't want to end up like that. So that's why really we are pushing hard Airflow 2.0, but not because we want to push Airflow 2.0, but because it is a really massive, incredible improvement from Airflow 1.10.x.
Thank you. So I think the last question is, do you recommend using the Kubernetes executor, and should it be used instead of Celery with the Kida, for example?
I think there is no I think there is no best answer for that, because it really depends of what you are trying to achieve and what is your knowledge. Like what are your skills? What are the skills of your team? Obviously, Kubernetes is great, but using Kubernetes, understanding Kubernetes is hard. Okay, so Kubernetes is great, but really it can be hard. The learning curve of Kubernetes is hard. So definitely, if you're ready for Kubernetes, go with the Kubernetes executor. If you have it's the way your tasks are executed inside pods that makes your Airflow instance more reliable, more efficient. But the thing is, if you don't really know Kubernetes and how it works, you should definitely go with the celery executor. And actually, this is a good point. I mean, if you use the celery executor with SCADA, when you are mixing both things. But if you use the only the celery executor, you will still be able to execute as many tasks as you want in a very efficient way. So in my opinion, you should always start with the simplest way to achieve what you are trying to do, and then move forward if you hit some limitations that can be solved with the Kubernetes executor. And actually, one quick point with Airflow 2.0, there is a new executor, which is the Celery Kubernetes executor, or maybe the other way around. So this one is a beast. Like if you want to mix Celery and Kubernetes, you can do that as well. So feel free to use the nuclear bomb if you want.
I just wanted to mention that the Celery Kubernetes executor is like, I think, the best approach if you want to use both Celery with Kida and the Kubernetes. Okay, so thank you, Mark. That was really inspiring introduction to the Apache Airflow 2.0, and I think that many people will watch your tutorials and will upgrade to the zero as soon as possible.
So
and let's drop the support for Python 2.7. Okay, so clap for Mark, and I think it's a time for our last talk, which will be given by Sławek Walkowski, who is a senior software engineer in the Cloud Composer, which is Apache Airflow as a service delivered by the Google. I believe that we have a few users of Composer here. So Sławek, now it's your time.
All right, thank you very much for the introduction. Today I want to talk about how Cloud Composer approaches the integration with UI and access control of the UI. And whenever I'm talking about the UI, I mean the web server, the web interface, because I know that UI can be an ambiguous term, but here I mean Airflow UI. So today I want to cover the following topics. So first I will talk about how we've approached controlling access to the classic Airflow UI so far in Cloud Composer. And then I will discuss how we integrated Cloud Composer with the role-based access control RBAC Airflow UI. So whenever I say classic UI, I mean non-RBAC as opposed to RBAC UI. And then I will cover two specific topics which I think may be interesting from the technical point of view, like how we integrated login to Airflow UI with Cloud Identity Aware Proxy. And I will also describe the feature that we've added on top of Airflow RBAC, which is per folder auto-registration of roles and DAG permissions. Yeah, so far in Cloud Composer, whenever you created a Composer environment, you are getting the non-RBAC classic web interface, which is the default for Airflow 1.x environments in Composer, and generally it is the default in Airflow 1, right? So this was and this is the environment that you get by default. But even though the classic Airflow UI doesn't offer fine-grained access control measures, um, we are still applying cloud side access control when the user is accessing the classic Airflow UI. So all the requests from the users go through Cloud Identity Aware Proxy. This is another service in Google Cloud Platform, which handles authentication and authorization. So you log into your Google account, and then Cloud Identity Aware Proxy checks in Cloud IAM whether you are allowed to view the Airflow UI. And so to let a user access Airflow UI, you need to grant the user the specific permission, which is composer environments get, and you grant it on the project in which your Cloud Composer environment is located. You do it through Cloud IAM settings, and this permission is included, for example, in the composer user role. Right? So you set this role on the user, and this way the user can access the Airflow UI. But it is like a coarse-grained setting. Like either the user can open and browse the whole UI, or they cannot access it at all. So this has worked fine for our customers, for Composer users so far. But obviously, first of all, in Airflow itself, especially in Airflow 2, the role-based access control, the RBAC UI, is the future. And of course, it includes features that the classic UI doesn't offer. So the time has come for Cloud Composer to also start supporting Airflow RBAC out of the box. So now in Composer you can have environments with Airflow RBAC UI enabled. Currently, this feature on the Composer side is launched to the previous stage, which is public preview, so anyone can try this out. The Airflow RBAC UI in Composer is available for the recent Composer versions and recent Airflow versions, essentially. And to enable RBAC UI in Cloud Composer, just like in Airflow, you just set the appropriate entry in the configuration. So in case of Composer, this is set through the Airflow configuration override. When you create or update a Composer environment, you set web server RBAC true in the UI, in the CLI, or through Composer API. And this way you get the environment with RBAC UI. And of course, you get all the goodness that comes with Airflow RBAC, which is generally managing users, permissions, and roles within Airflow. I will not discuss this all these features in details here. I think what is more interesting is how we integrated Airflow RBAC access control with Cloud IAM and the access control that we have used so far. So the identity-aware proxy is still there. So the access to the environment, to the environment's web interface as a whole is still controlled through identity-aware proxy. So this hasn't changed. So the user authenticates here and is authorized. And again, this is like the high-level authorization to the web interface. And then Airflow RBAC UI still, just like in the vanilla Airflow, operates on the RBAC tables within the Airflow metadata database. So it has its own representation of the security model. I mean, users, permissions, and roles. And this is how the fine-grained authorization is handled. What is interesting, like we don't do kind of a double authentication. I will speak about this more in a few minutes. So now, when Airflow RBAC is enabled, you configure access essentially in two places. So just like before, to let the user open the web interface at all, you specify the user in the Cloud IAM settings of your project, and you grant the permission there. And then for Airflow permissions, I mean the access control settings within Airflow, you set this configuration in Airflow RBAC UI, so the user must be granted appropriate roles to view appropriate pages, access specific dags, and so on. So now you may ask, but how are the users registered in Airflow RBAC? Like, how do the user records appear there? So if a user hasn't visited the Airflow RBAC instance of the given environment before, they will be registered in Airflow RBAC automatically. And I'll talk about the details of this process in the next few slides. The registration is similar to how you would to how it would look like if you enabled, for example, Google authentication, the built-in Google authentication in Airflow. So the user is registered with the numerical user ID of their Google account as the username, and with their email address as the email. Also, administrators can pre-register users by adding the user records manually. Then they set the email address as the username, and it gets resolved to the user ID at the user login time, which is of course useful if the administrator wants to assign roles to users before they show up in the Airflow UI. In Composer, we are setting the default registration role, so the role that the new users that are automatically registered in Airflow UI get. We take it from the web server RBAC user registration role property. This is Composer's custom property, and so this way you can control what is the role of the default role of the users that log in to Airflow. The default user registration role is admin, because the standard scenario that we expect administrators will follow is that after they create the environment, the first users, so those administrators, will log into Airflow, and they will be registered as admins, and then they can change the registration role to, for example, user, so that the next users that come in don't have full admin permissions, but just some reasonable limited permissions for the regular users. And the reason why this is set through a custom property is that we we don't in Composer we don't expose the web server config that is normally used for setting this kind of permissions, because we are essentially simplifying and populating the web server config with some pre-configured options, and essentially this is the only input that we need from the user, like what's the default role that they should get when they log in for the first time. All right, so now I will talk about more details of how exactly the login and Airflow UI is integrated with the Google account login. So the problem that we are facing here was double authentication, essentially, because like I showed in the earlier diagram, we have these two steps of managing access control. So one is through Cloud Identity Aware Proxy, and the other one is in Airflow RBAC itself. And if we keep them both configured the default way, the user would need to authenticate twice, essentially. Like first here in Cloud IAP, and then again they would get this screen, and they would need to sign in through Google here as well. So we want to simplify this, and because we want to keep Cloud Identity Aware Proxy as like guarding the access to the Airflow web server, we've essentially modified or came up with a custom login handler that allowed us to eliminate this second authentication in Airflow RBAC. So the way it works is that the identity aware proxy, after it authenticated and authorized the user, it sends the request to the backend. In this case, the backend is Airflow RBAC UI, and it adds additional headers. One of them is this signed header, which contains information about the user who has logged in to identity aware proxy. In particular, it contains the sub field. I think it's short for subject, which is a unique stable identifier for the user, and email, which is the user email address. So Airflow UI already knows what user is accessing. So this second authentication isn't really needed in this particular setup when the access is strictly controlled by a proxy like Cloud Identity Aware Proxy. So once we get the signed header in Airflow RBAC UI, it goes to the special login handler that we've prepared actually with our partners from Polydia here. So first we decode user ID and email address from the header, so those fields that I showed on the previous slide, and then the handler looks up the user in the RBAC tables in the metadata database, and if the user has been pre-registered with the email address, then the record is updated with the user ID. Or if the user doesn't exist at all, then the user record is created. So this is this auto registration to Airflow RBAC that is happening. So at this point, the user exists, so we can log the user in. So now I will talk about the per folder auto registration feature. So in Airflow RBAC, there is this very nice feature of DAG level permissions, which to me is one of the key features of Airflow RBAC, and why I would want to use Airflow RBAC instead of the classic UI. So this model offers per DAG permissions that can be added to roles, and to do this, like it can either be done in Airflow RBAC UI or in the DAG code. Right, there is the access control property. Although it's, at least in Airflow 1, right, it requires syncing by refreshing the DAGs in Airflow UI or running the sync perm CLI command. So it's not fully automated, I would say, and even if it was synced automatically, then still you need to remember about setting this in your DAGs or apply some common settings to your DAGs. So we are thinking how to automate associating DAGs with roles here, and we came up with an interesting idea of the feature that we call per folder roles auto registration that we offer in Cloud Composer. Currently, it's in private preview, so it's not available publicly. You need to be allow listed to be able to use it, but that's because it's an early phase, and we are gathering feedback on this feature. At the end of my talk, I will also tell you if you want to try it out, like how to reach out to us and test it yourselves. So how does this feature work? So we automate the DAG to role assignment. So something that was previously done either in the UI or in DAG code, simply by the folder in which the DAG is located. So, for example, if we have DAGs in the subfolders of the main DAGs folder, then we can assume that those are the groups of DAGs that should be associated with different roles. So, for example, the following structure of the DAGs folder is automatically translated to the following structure of roles and the assigned permissions in the Airflow RBAC table. So essentially, for each DAG, we add the DAG edit and DAG read permissions to the roles, which names are taken directly from the subfolders. This feature, just like RBAC itself, is enabled through yet another Airflow property that you set through Airflow configuration overrides in Composer. Again, this one is in private preview for now. And how it works. So there is like no magic here or no extensive patching of Airflow. We actually used the existing Airflow cluster policy feature, and we implemented this as a piece of logic injected through this existing mechanism in Airflow, which I think is a good example of how the cluster policy can be used. So the cluster policy allows you to run custom code for every task or DAG parsed and loaded in Airflow scheduler, and this is exactly why we added this logic to our custom cluster policy. So all the cluster policy does is that it extracts the top level folder name from the DAG file path and uses it directly as the role name. Then it retrieves the the RBAC security manager from the cached app builder object, essentially the Python object that allows us to query and modify the RBAC access control settings in the Airflow database. And then we create the role if it doesn't exist yet, and then we add the can DAG edit and read permissions on the given DAG to the role, and we do this for all the roles. So this way the authors of the DAGs or the administrators don't need to worry about assigning DAGs to different roles. They can just have a contract that, okay, for this folder, maybe the folder belongs to this team, the other folder belongs to another team, or maybe these are just groups of DAGs to which we want to control access by assigning them to the roles and then granting the roles to specific users. All right, so I want to do just a quick demo, essentially showing how this works live. So yeah, in Cloud Composer, in the environment details page, you can see that for an environment that has RBAC enabled, as I said, there is this configuration override, and then you open you access the web UI through the link posted there. Let me just quickly change the language here. Yeah, and this is the sign-in prompt that you get from Cloud IAP essentially to log in. So you choose your Google account. I'm already authenticated here, so just choosing the account is enough. And this way, I access the Airflow UI, and now this is the RBAC UI with all the settings. So like I showed, there is in the list of user, like Airflow UI gets the user ID and the email from Cloud Identity Aware Proxy, and it creates the user record accordingly. So in the second quick example, I have an environment which has this other feature enabled, the per role, or sorry, per folder roles auto registration. It is enabled. Also, I logged in so that I logged in first after I created my environment with only these two settings. So I am registered as admin, but then I changed the user registration role to the user so that next users don't get admin permissions. So now how does the auto registration work? So I uploaded a bunch of DAGs to the DAGs folder, and just like in the example from the slides, I grouped them by subfolders, right? So in each subfolder there are some DAGs, and that was it. Like that's all I did. And after a couple of minutes, when the scheduler has processed these DAGs, well, of course they showed up here, but also the roles and the corresponding permissions showed up in the RBAC settings. So you can see, yeah, that, for example, for this bar DAGs folder, the role appeared, and it has permissions on the DAGs that exist in this folder. Plus, of course, all the permissions that are added to custom roles by default by Airflow. So now we can use these roles to assign different groups of dags to the users, right? So I pre-registered some sample users in here, and also I am registered as an admin. So let's do a quick experiment. So if I limit my role to just this one, should only, yeah, well, access denied because I can no longer access the users page, but I can access this page. But now, well, I'm no longer an admin, so I don't see the security and admin settings here. But also, I only see the dags that existed in this folder. Okay. I think I clicked back too many times. Anyway, those were the dags that existed in the bar dags folder, and now as I'm only assigned this role, I can only see these dags. All right, so that's it for my talk. If you want to learn more, you can visit the Airflow RBAC page under Cloud Composer documentation. This one is for the public preview feature of the Airflow RBAC availability. And if you want to try out the per folder roles auto registration feature that I mentioned in Cloud Composer, you can contact this email address, cloudcomposerfeedback@google.com, and we can grant you access to this feature. All right, so thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Sławek, for a really good presentation. I think this feature is quite interesting. One question is the access to the dags.
Right, I can see a question from Tomek. Is this RBAC feature in GA? So the integration of Cloud Composer with Airflow RBAC, as I said, it's currently in preview. So currently in Google Cloud, there are essentially two stages of feature launches. One is preview, and the next one is GA. So this one is currently in preview. We want to make sure that it works as expected, and later we'll graduate it to GA. The other feature, the per folder auto registration, is in private preview currently.
Sławek, can you hear us?
Okay. Do we have any other questions?
Yes. I've got one question, so right. I think I can.
No more questions? I don't see any. All right, thank you.
Okay, so I think that we can finish the talk. I think that at the end we still have some technical issues.
I can see that Tomek is speaking, but I can't hear you.
Yeah, so exactly that's the problem, if you can hear me and Sławek. But thank you all. If you have any more questions to Sławek, Jarek, or Jamal or Mark, feel free to reach them on the Apache Airflow Slack, and I'm sure they will answer to that.
Thank you so much, Tomek, and applause for everybody. And we apologize for any inconveniences that we may have caused because of the technical difficulties. the recordings will be available and they will be edited so that you don't experience the same thing in the videos. I will be sending out an email for everyone so you can have access to those recordings. And as Tomek said, please stay tuned. We will have our next virtual Airflow meetup, which is scheduled for March 18th. And remember that the Airflow Summit is scheduled for May 24th through the 28th. So stay tuned for that. And I will be dropping down in YouTube the link to the feedback forum. We really appreciate getting feedback from those who are on the virtual meetup today. And that is pretty much all. Thank you again, Tomek, and to all of our wonderful speakers, Aishamal, Jarek, Slavik, and Mark.
Thank you all, and see you next time.
Take care. Stay healthy and safe.
Bye.